Well, hello, First Church family. Thanks for taking a few minutes to stop by my virtual office. I wanted to take a few minutes today to give you a little bit of an update and try to answer, well, what's probably one of the most frequently asked questions that I've received in my conversations with some of you during these past weeks, and I think our elders would say the same. The question we've been getting again and again is when? When do we get to meet together again? When can we come to church on a Sunday morning and worship as a family of God? Well, that's been the question, and unfortunately, the answer I have to give you today is probably not anytime soon. This week, some of you know, the state of Colorado released guidelines for places of public worship and faith communities. It's a pretty long document. I think it's probably 4 or 5 pages. But they released that document, and so that came out Monday. Tuesday, we gathered together a small team to review this document, to review these guidelines, and to try to determine what should be appropriate next steps for us, given what we know and given what we can do. So this was a team of a pretty great team. We had a biology professor on this team. We had a hospital chaplain, a lawyer, a couple of teachers, someone who worked in the nursing home industry. So people who were pretty well versed in policy and the needs of vulnerable people and also of our community. And after reflecting on these guidelines, what this team realized is that any worship service that we could have, at least for the foreseeable future, well, it would probably be unlike any worship service we've ever had, and maybe any worship service we'd want to have, quite frankly. Any service, any gathering that we could have, well, if we followed the guidelines, which we really believe we need to do, well, we'd have to miss out on a lot of the things that we really love about coming together as a family of God. Just give you a few examples. If we followed the guidelines, the most people we could have in our sanctuary, including all staff and volunteers, would be 50 people. And those 50 people would have to sit 6 feet away from each other. And those 50 people were strongly discouraged. We would have to strongly discourage anyone from over 65 attending. And just because of some of the rules and guidelines, we'd also, it would be a little complicated about how we might learn to welcome children in a group in a setting like that. So there'd be a large swaths of our congregation who would have difficulty participating. Also, if we met for worship, we couldn't sing together. And I know for me, that's one of the things I really miss. I miss singing with the family of God. I think that's so beautiful and it's so important for our faith formation, but we couldn't do it. We also couldn't stand around after the service and drink coffee. Couldn't have coffee, but we also couldn't stand around. You pretty much have to be ushered in, ushered out. You'd have to follow directional arrows. Try not to touch anything. Try not to use the bathroom. So there's a lot of restrictions and a lot of guidelines that we have to follow. And I'm not even getting into all the ways we have to clean up the building in between group usages and things like that. So yes, looking at all of that, our team determined that that's really not a First Church worship service. And any kind of service we could have, it would be fairly unrecognizable to us and maybe even undesirable to us as far as corporate worship goes. So the recommendation of that team to the elders was that we continue in the pattern that we've established these last few months of having liturgies distributed to people that they can use as families or in groups of 10 or less. But that we continue to follow this pattern until at least July 5. All right, so we continue this pattern until at least July 5. Or another way to put that is to say the soonest that we could gather together again would be July 12. But understand, that's not a promise, because early July we're going to meet again. We're going to see what new information we've learned, see if the guidelines have been updated at all, see what kind of studies and risks there might continue to be. And we'll see if it seems wise and appropriate for us to gather starting July 12. But really, that's how we're going to go. We're going to go month by month now. So wait for that announcement. But as of now, we're going to keep on keeping on. Now, I know that's not the news some of you wanted to hear. Frankly, that wasn't the news I wanted to hear. I think it's the right decision, but I'm still kind of sad about it. So for those of you who are feeling that way, or for all of you, really, just three brief words I want to give you in parting. Okay, three kind of pastoral admonitions today. First of all, I want to encourage you to be gracious. Believe it or not, there was not a class in seminary on how to do ministry in a pandemic. This is new territory for all of us. And I know that we've got a diverse church. There's all kinds of opinions. Some of us think this is the right decision. Some of us think we're being way too cautious. Others maybe think we're being too aggressive in doing anything together. But I just want to encourage you to be gracious, be forgiving. We know we're going to make some mistakes. We know we're not going to do this exactly the way everybody wants us to do. But as always, in this family of God, be gracious with each other. And be gracious with your leadership, please. Second thing I want to say is please be encouraged. Right? Be encouraged that the life and ministry of our church goes on. The church has never been closed, right? The ministry of the church has continued. And in this last month and going forward, we're being even more intentional about trying to figure out ways to say, how do we navigate what seems to be a new normal for a while? How do we find new ways to be together as a family of God, to grow as disciples, and to live out our faith wherever God has placed us? Right, so be encouraged that that's happening. And the last thing I'll say to you is be consistent, and maybe along with that, be persistent. I know that for some of you, online worship is not your cup of tea. You miss being together. And for others of you, it's just hard, right? I get that. I've got young children. I have expectations and hopes about how our worship time is going to go each week. And it doesn't always go that way. Sometimes it's hard. I understand that. But again, I want to encourage you to be consistent. For those of you with kids, think about the example you're setting for your children about what's important in your lives and what you value. I mean, what are they going to look back on and take from this experience years from now about what you value and what's important for your family? But just beyond that, I want to encourage you because it's not only important to develop and keep good habits and patterns, but I would say during this time when not only are we dealing with the pandemic, but we're dealing with racial crisis in our country and crisis of justice and so much other stuff going on, worship is so important. And I know it can feel irrelevant and removed from the world, but I really believe that as a follower of Jesus Christ, regular and consistent worship is one of the most important things you can do during a time of crisis. Worship is how we get our eyes lifted back up to the one who sits on the throne. We are reminded that we are a part of a bigger reality, right? A bigger story, and that we get to live according to that story, not the story that we're reading on the news or the story our Twitter feeds are telling us or whatever else. Right? So it forms us because it lifts our eyes up to Jesus, to our King. It reminds us that we belong to him. And worship, in all kinds of ways, shapes us in our love for him, our love for our neighbors, our love for the kingdom of Jesus. So friends, be consistent, be persistent. Be encouraged that ministry is still happening, and be gracious and kind. Be assured that Jesus is still king. The ministry of the church still continues. You are still known, and you are still loved. And we will get through this. Grace and peace to you all.